So this will, you know, and we can only do so many of these. We can only do, I mean, there's a limit because the wing is, and the nacelles are longer, and the body is, in essence, changed some in relationship to things. So you just can't make an exact scale copy, or else what we could do is photo enlarge the plan, this little drawing up, if we're making a scale model, and just make styrene cutouts. This styrene is very inexpensive. In fact, Ed gave us some on the last time he was down here. And we really miss him because he was supposed to make another visit, but he's had some health issues and we've postponed it to the summer. You know, I want to do the other side because I want to see if it looks like we're close enough on both sides that I can use this on both. But you never know when one side is just going to be just a little bit different. When I saw this trick, you know, one of the tricks, you could watch 20 hours of video and find one thing that saves you 30 hours and you're ahead of the game. Or that allows you to do things that otherwise there's just no way you're going to do it. So I hope these Inkline videos and all this trim videos and things will allow you to make some much nicer planes. Anyway, now we have that tape on both sides set back from the edge. We just go ink the plane. Now this is a place where I have to connect that line, but the template isn't quite long enough, so I'm just going to have to do a little final adjustment at the very end. And I know I got to bridge this up in the front. Thank you, Ed Cotton. I picked up little pieces as I'm working the edge. I want to get the whole edge in. And I wrapped this line around. So now I have two reference points to work off. Now I need to do the same thing, wrap these lines around, and then measure back from the leading edge exactly the same way we did so that the lines are relatively symmetrical anyway. But I thought it would be easier since I had this line up on a fuselage now. I see one thing already I can't. This ends in the gap. I thought I would make that white line disappear. I got to move that line back so that it doesn't go into the groove. These are the kind of things you see when you assemble a plane. You didn't take that into account when we first started. But the rest of this is kind of redundant. Just pulling all the lines off the bottom for now. Making an outline the way we did. Pulling all the lines front to back, then all the lines side to side. Then I'll look at it, decide if I've got too much, not enough. The one thing is for sure, the second side always goes a lot quicker than the first side. This isn't really funny. I have a pattern, and I laid this all out except for one thing. It's backwards. This is supposed to go this way. And I looked at it for 5 minutes and I couldn't figure out why it looks different than the bottom. Unbelievable. Now see, the tip off would have been, I should have been. I have the ink lines to line this up on. So, I wanted to show this for a reason. You make a mistake, and believe me, you're not in some kind of super league that you made a mistake. You can just wet a Q-tip and the last little bit that goes up and touches the ink line, it's easier to get it off with a razor blade. Makes for a cleaner job. So now maybe I'll pay more attention, or because as nice as it is to have templates, if you put them on backwards, it doesn't do it. Because the line spacing is just a little different, I got to line this up. Okay. And because I have the tape on backwards, there's the other issue. Amazing how you can. Now, had I gotten to finish the job and not noticed that, shame on me. With all these teenage pens around the house. It's nice to have the templates, so that's for sure. Otherwise, these, even little things like this, which I call it the things nobody notices. But the truth is, the person that builds the airplane notices them. And there's never a time when having something that isn't right is better than having it right. But that's the nice thing about ink. Even if you put the ink lines on backwards, you can somehow straighten it out. It's really funny. And I looked at this, and I looked at it for 3 minutes, and I couldn't determine what was wrong. Unbelievable. But point is, we got one wing almost laid out. I'm going to start on the other one here soon. We got one framed out, or the lines connected in the front. There's a lot of final decisions we have to make on this yet, though. But that's, I guess, kind of the fun of ink lining. It's like a model railroad. You just keep moving stuff around until you like it. And then when you're all done, you probably move it 4 more times. I'm closing in on having Yesterday I finalized what I thought was going to be the amount of ink lines, simulated the gas caps, did a little detailing around what was the, I think, radiator outlets, did some work up by the cowl simulate the hinges for the access panels. And just in general, spent about an hour laying these parts on the floor and just looking to see how I like them in terms of balance and in terms of do we want to add or take away anything. There's still a little detailing to do today. But one of the things I want to start with, I want to get the detailing of the exhaust stains on here. Now I have some paint that I have left over from the Typhoon that had that color in it, that rust color. But all the exhaust stains on all different aeroplanes are different. They're not all the same. It's a detail I really liked on the A-26 actually, and I liked it on the B-25 too. The way that looked in the final product, it was a lot of back and forth, but I really did like the coloring, the brown, the rust color. But again, if you look at a couple of pictures, you know, all of the planes have different, if you're doing a P-51 or a Bearcat or whatever, all the staining is usually different. And once I set the airbrush up, I like to do it in several different colors. I like to get it in a dark brown, then a light brown, then accent it, because the real stain is not all one color. Choice one is you can just have no stain, as if the plane had just been washed or waxed or cleaned or whatever. Again, I thought the staining and the way it was on the A-26, I thought that really added a nice little dimension to it. Now, because we're going over black instead of silver, we may have to change the color in the airbrush. I don't know yet until we lay it out. Nice exhaust stain on Al's P-51. Just get some idea of it. It's not just what people think is you just take some black in the airbrush and smudge it on. It's not that at all. And it actually does change color. It lightens out toward the end and it's dark up by the stacks if you're going to do an exhaust stain. Al has a video too, by the way, that describes in detail how he does it with the various colors. Al's Bearcat has a nice staining effect. And I hope when Walt Russell does his Bearcat, he's going to get some, not only the white ink, he's already got that video, but some of the other little tips, because we can basically share some of these. And even I see on John Cafaro's little sketch, I see some indication he might want to have some exhaust stacks on there. This is just one of the Tigercat photos that you can see some of the exhaust staining going out the sides of the cowls. On some of the rebuild Tigercats, I noticed they've replaced this piece of sheet metal with what looks like a new piece of metal that doesn't even have paint on it. So if you were going to simulate that piece being unpainted, and you'd really see the exhaust stain even more. In our case, we're just going to leave it black. Again, having plenty of pictures, at least get it that you can start from a realistic point of view. You know, if you were going to simulate that again, you could make that panel silver and the exhaust stain would jump out at you. But I think in our case, that isn't something I'm going to be able to realistically do because I've extended the nacelle some. You can see on the real plane some of the exhaust stain. Actually, what looks like here is one cylinder is running lean. It's gray. A lean cylinder would be gray, a rich cylinder would be black, and a cocoa toast colored one would be when it's running right on the money. I'm sure some of these Reno Air Race and some of these planes that are not used for warbird purposes, I'm sure they polish them every time they use them, so you really have a lot of choices. You can let it look like a real warbird, or you can let it look like a Reno racer. Now I like to kind of look at this before I pull the cowls, because I'm going to have to backmask some of these little areas as I get the paint ready. I need to get the rust colored paint in the airbrush. And I guess the easiest way to do this, as we always do, pull the cowls and start with the bottom first. Now after mixing up the paint, and I've had this in a jar for a while, what I did, I lightened it up. I made it lighter than it was for the silver, because on the silver the contrast would have been a dark color. I got the pressure down to about 10 pounds so I don't get a lot of overspray. In fact, you can see this is an Iwata airbrush, and you can see how nice it fades, and I do a little bit of practicing before I go over to the model, because the trick is going to be to start dark and end light. So you want to have a lot of pressure and then just pull the airbrush away. The trick that I found for myself is spray it and just pull the airbrush away, and it leaves that nice feathered look out there. Now, whether we're going to be able to replicate that, I just have masked around the rivet heads here because I wanted to have a contrast. The reality is it would go down under the wing, and it would be its darkest right in here. And I think that'll do it. Now again, it's going to be the darkest right up by the lip. And a little bit of overspray you get is just making it just a little more realistic than it normally would be. The real Tigercat has some real serious staining on the ones that were in all the war ones. Whatever the reason is, I guess they didn't wax them a lot. The one thing I want to be careful of is not to overdo it. Just to be conservative about it. A little bit of overspray that works its way down the back of the nacelle and onto the front of the wing. I would think that's relatively realistic. I want to try to work my way up around the edges. Try to balance it off so it's relatively the same. I think the fact if you just leave a little bit of striping even, in this case it starts to look more realistic. Trying to get it to work its way up around the wing if possible a little bit. Another thing with the airbrush, you can always practice with the airbrush on light bulbs or paint cans or anything until you get to where you're happy with the color and you can make little practice exercises. Now for the second color, this is just a little bit lighter. I put a little bit of orange in. You can see the difference in the color. All this is going to be is just the lip. It's a very orangey brown. And to me, when I looked at the Tigercat exhaust stains, that looked pretty much like what they look like. I'm just putting it on the lip. So and making little bars. But don't forget, the exhaust stains are coming out of individual exhaust pipes too. Now, I'm not sure about other people, but this is one of the parts of the building of a plane that I kind of enjoy, is getting all the little airbrush work done. I'm trying to be careful not to make them that they all look the same. They want to be just a little bit different. And once this dries up, I want to give it a few minutes to dry up. I want to pull off all the little papers, because a lot of times there leaves a little tape stain there where some of the overspray gets by the tape, and when you pull it up you can see where the tape was. So if that's the case, before I clean the gun or the airbrush, I can just give that a little swipe if necessary. We'll see once we pull the tape off. Now I just got to look for any errant overspray. I don't think that side looks okay. It pulls up some of the ink. I may have to re-ink this. Now this side here needs a little bit of I'll show what I'm talking about. You can see right there's a little bit of a spot where it knows the masking tape was there. It doesn't blend perfectly. We'll just hit that with the airbrush very slightly right at the end. Here's another thing too. I don't like the way that ended. What am I doing here? So you could probably wipe some of that off. Just make that final blend. I'm not even going to touch that up. I'm just going to leave that. Now what I wanted to do is look at it with, get an idea how it looks with the cowls on. Oh yeah, that's really going to stand out. Okay, I'd say that's about as good as I could have expected it. Now here's what I do at the end of mixing. I had 3 separate colors that went into those exhausts, and I'm not sure I'm going to add or subtract colors or change it or whatever, but I want to save this. It took quite a while to get the color blend that I wanted. I really wasn't, this is not a 5-minute job to get the colors to look realistic and to look like they do in the picture. So what I decided to do, since the odds are real good we're going to be doing exhaust staining in the future, just mark them up and put them in our drawer with stuff to start next year's project. What I want to do is I want to do a little test to see how I'm going to like the white shading. Because if I don't like it white, I can change the color. Now I have some tape that's already been used, so it's not very sticky. Now to get this on, what I'm going to try to do, and this is just for my test piece anyway, is just go right up to the white line but not over it. The trick is, if it's a trick, I'm not sure, is to get it right up on the line. because I'm going to put very, very little shading. I did a little experimenting to see how much shading would look the way I wanted it to look, and it took very little. So I have the air pressure down to about 7 pounds, at least on my gauge. And the other thing is I have the paint extremely thin. It's about 2/3 thinner and 1/3 Rodak white. Now what that gives me is a real liquidy, very thin. It's not going to cover, and that's what I want. I just want to dust on. You know what I want to do is take this part outside, put a coat of clear on it, and see if I like that amount of shading, or if I want to change the color, if I want to change the amount I have. Now when I'm doing shading, one of the things, all of the lines that'll be shaded, the shading will be as if they were on the shading will always be on the bottom. Because picture, as an aircraft sits outside, any of the dirt, I call it schmutz, would tend to run under that line and run down. Also, it would never go forward, it would always go back from the air blowing down. So you have the weather pulling it down this way, airflow pulling it back that way. And that's the two things that I always thought look real good, is if you just hit this line right in the middle and randomly do a corner. A corner I think really looks nice, and a little bit here, but to shade the whole line, it starts to look like a Lego block then. So I'm going to try to avoid that. Now let me get my, I got to plug the airbrush in. Again, ultra low air pressure. Let me get this out of the way just in case. I also, this is for my benefit, I taped this here just for the fact that what would happen from time to time, this hole winds up walking around the front, and as you go to do a part, a drip will come out. So that's kind of the solution for that. Now again, I got to randomly pick a spot, work on the tape, and just work my way out. If in doubt, you can see there's almost no air pressure. You can see how much, almost nothing's coming out. Just one little shot right in the middle. I want to do a couple of corners, and I'm going to go outside. I just want to do one part with clear, see what it looks like. Here's the thing though, I can always add a little bit, but it's real difficult to take it away. If I spray it over, if I try to get rid of this white with airbrush and black on, what's going to happen is I lose all my riveting and ink lining. And if I put tape up on the ink lines, some of it's going to remove the ink lines. So there's a lot of downsides to putting too much on, and almost no downside. Because even after the couple of coats of clear on, I can add some. Now I've got just that little burst that I like, just a little bit. Now, and again, this is tape that's been used. It's not new tape. The older the tape is, the better. I'm leaving the ink line exposed if I can, because then I don't pull up the ink line.